Hello again. And today I do want to touch on a subject that came up in one of the groups that I belong to online. And it's something that I've touched on in the past, in a previous video, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. And that is a subject of modifications on bikes. Now, I do love modifications, and I think if you do it well, you can probably even get a better performance. And then you have cosmetic modifications, and it's always good to make the bike look that suits your personality. But as I mentioned before, sometimes these kind of cosmetic modifications can be extremely personal. And when you make a lot of cosmetic modifications, sometimes selling it, unless you find a buyer who is like-minded, has the same taste, it may be difficult to unload later on. But this actually is a different type of modification, and I'm not talking about big bikes. Actually, this is really related to scooters. Scooters of, let's say, 100cc to 250cc, that range. Now, in one of the groups that I belong to, and I was checking it this past week, somebody was asking the question. They have a 125 scooter. I don't remember the brand. It may have been a Kymco. May have been. I'm not sure. But they were wondering what kind of modifications they could make to give it more power. Now, while this is possible, is it something that you really want to do on a small capacity engine? You see, small capacity engines, you're limited to what you can do with it. Now, while you can go extreme, and you probably can increase the power. There's people that I know that have increased the power of their 125s up to 180, and in some cases even pushed it to 250. It's a bit of a tricky thing. Now, approximately 3 years ago, a friend and I, we bought two exact same scooters. They're Yamaha BWSs from 2012 and 2013. Now, in many markets around the world, the BWS is sold as a scoot. But in Japan, here in Taiwan, and a number of other places in Asia, it's sold as a BWS. And actually, that scooter does have a rather big following here in Taiwan. It's been on the market for a good number of years. They're completely now into a new generation, which have water cooling. Previously, all the other ones were all air cooled. So there are some tremendous changes that they made to it, and it is extremely reliable. And it's a bit like, as I tell people, Yamaha scooters are like a Toyota Camry or a Toyota Corolla. Maybe they're not exactly as fast as some other ones, but they are extremely reliable and you take care of them. So let me tell you what could go wrong with modifications. So when we bought these two second-hand BWS scooters, he was trying to convince me to upgrade it and to modify the engine. And I was like, no, I think I will keep it the way it is. Now, I was getting maybe a top speed. The only thing I really did change was the suspension and the CVT parts. So I managed to get a little bit more speed out of it. If I'm flat, I can go up to about 105, 110. And his was pretty much the same. But then he decided to open the Pandora's box of modifying the engine. So what did he do? Well, we'll go to the simple stuff first. First, the suspension was changed. No problem there. The brake calipers were changed. No problem there. They kind of needed it on his. Then he went to the bigger items. So he changed the cylinder. He changed the piston. He changed the fuel injection system. And he changed the ECU. He also changed the oxygen sensors. And surprisingly, now we didn't run it on a dyno because that would be way too expensive. But he did spend an extra 45,000 Taiwan dollars. 45,000 Taiwan dollars. You'll see the exchange rate below. Now we bought the two scooters for the same price. I paid 25,000, and the one that he got was 26,500,000. So pretty much almost the same price. Getting back to the modifications that he did. So with the modifications that he did, he was getting much faster than I was. I mean, he was able to reach 130, 135. And that scooter flew. I mean, it really flew. So, as I mentioned before, I'm not a big scooter fan. I own this one, and I also own a Yamaha Force. So he said, let's go on a trip, and we'll take the BWS scooters out. And we did. We went for not that long a trip. I mean, just down to Kaohsiung, which is in the south part of Taiwan. And this is after maybe 2.5, 3 months. Somebody's order is ready, as you can hear. So 2.5 to 3 months after the modifications were done. Well, this was interesting. We left Taipei at around 7 o'clock in the morning. We stopped for fuel once. We continued on the way, and then he was passing me. And then at one point, he wasn't passing me. And there was definitely some sort of technical problem. There was how would I express it this way? A slight plume of smoke emanating from the exhaust, which wasn't there when we set off, and it wasn't there the day before. But there was this plume of smoke that started and just got more dense and more dense. And then at one point, in the middle of nowhere, the engine cut out. So we stopped for a bit. We thought we'd let it cool. And then when he tried to start it, it made the most, what could only be described as the most interesting racket that I've heard from an engine. You can hear the sound of that engine disintegrating just on startup. Now, the BWS that I have has bars on it, and I had some of those towing ropes, so I had to tow him for approximately 60 kilometers till we got to a space where there was more people. And we tried, let's try it again. And it was clang, clang, bang, bang, just on the starter motor. Sounds coming, those were the sounds coming from the engine. So we managed to find a truck, and he loaded it onto the truck and sent it back to Taipei. I, on the other hand, decided to continue because there was nothing wrong with mine. Well, let's just put it this way. Now, the modifications were not done by some backyard mechanic. This was a guy that always does modifications on small scooters, and usually scooters of people that will go to the racetrack. This, on the other hand, he even said, I can do these modifications. You will get a lot more power and a lot more speed. There's no doubt about that. But good if you're going to the racetrack, but maybe not so good if you're going to do any daily riding or going on any type of trip. Now, effectively, that scooter is kaput. The engine is dead. The engine can be repaired. And calculating all the costs that need to go into it to repair it comes out to about 27,000. So think about it. He paid 26,500. He spent another 45,000 to have the engine modified. And the repairs now, because there's so much damage, is $27,000. Now, granted, the one that I bought at exactly the same time isn't exactly the fastest. The only thing that I've actually had to repair on it since I bought it has been the starter motor, which I knew at the time of buying it was going. And I also replaced the tires and suspension and the CVT parts. Oh, and a new battery. But that was it. And it's still running exactly the same day it was when I bought it, and probably exactly the same way as it was when it left the factory. So my point here with modifications is, while you can do it on small engine scooters and motorcycles of, let's say, 125 cc or 200, you can do it, but I wouldn't do it. And it's sort of like the kind of thing that's happened to the car industry. We've seen this over the last few years. The example I would give is, I believe it's the Toyota Tundra. Now, the Toyota Tundra came with a V8. And it was also a V6. Now, they decided to stop the V8 and put a turbo on the 4-cylinder and the 6-cylinder. Now, the 6-cylinder can handle the turbo. The 4-cylinder, however, is a completely different story. The Toyota Tundra is a truck that is extremely well built and has an extremely good reputation. But because of these stupid small engines with a turbo on it, they're actually now starting to have problems. Another order. We've seen these kind of engines problem before in the Ford Focus, or the Ford Festiva, which had that stupid little 3-cylinder engine with an EcoBoost and turbo. I mean, it is ridiculous to put a turbo on that kind of engine, because it just won't last. If you have a large capacity bike, of course, it's easier to do modifications to the engine because the engine has a higher tolerance. But on small engines, which have a very low compression, I mean, it doesn't make any sense, and it's very, very silly. So if you are planning at some point to do these sort of modifications, think twice. Now, it depends. Like I said, if you are planning to take it to a situation where you're going to be racing it, that's completely fine, because you're not going to be putting that much distance on it. But if you're going to be using it as a daily or going on a long trip, chances you're running into a problem because the engine will overheat and the engine will just crumble apart are highly likely. Same goes with cars that have 4-cylinder engines and people put these ridiculous turbos on it. Volkswagen does it and they become oil burners. Audi has done it, they become burners. BMW has done it, they become burners. Every car company, they do it so they can pass EPA ratings in the United States. It's very silly. I mean, if you want an engine with power, just get a 6-cylinder or a V8. If you want a motorcycle with power, just get one with the power and then tweak it. Anyway, I'd like to find out what you think. You can always like, comment, and subscribe, and leave, anything else. So, have a good day, and I'll see you later. Tell me what you think. Bye-bye.